And we then brought evidence to the statewide grand jury. And I now can report that on March 31st, our statewide grand jury has indicted 3 individuals on 19 counts for alleged involvement in this complex scheme. The indictment alleges that since at least January of 2021 and until at least March of this year, members of this enterprise conspired to exploit and coerce women into engaging in sexual activity for money with customers at the spas that they owned and operated. The 3 spas in question are the Jewel Spa in Denver, Pine Therapy, ABC, and A Spa in Lakewood. All these are registered businesses with the state of Colorado, and the spas each had a small bedroom where it looked like the employees actually were living and sleeping. The investigators are able to link these defendants to this criminal enterprise through really careful investigative work, and we'll hear from the sergeant today about some of that, including a variety of records, including looking at banking, vehicle registration, and phone records. This careful evidence collection showed that defendants profited and lived off of the money they earned through illegal prostitution and human trafficking that was happening at these massage parlors. And then they used the funds to further promote and develop their criminal enterprise. The defendants are also accused of using multiple methods to conceal and disguise the nature, the source, the ownership, and control of the money, including using money laundering through casinos, money orders, and repeated small cash deposits they made through ATMs, all seeking to evade reporting requirements. The 3 defendants are Hei K Un So, Song Hai Yun Shim, Sun Hee Wolf. And they're charged with several crimes, including violating the Colorado Organized Crime Control Act, conspiracy to commit human trafficking for sexual servitude, pimping, conspiracy to commit pimping, money laundering, conspiracy to commit money laundering, keeping a place of prostitution, and pandering. Siu and Shim are also charged with human trafficking for sexual servitude. They have all turned themselves in, and the cases have been filed in Denver District Court. Let me emphasize that a grand jury indictment is a formal accusation that an individual committed a crime under Colorado law. All defendants are presumed innocent until proven guilty. In addition to the offices of District Attorneys McCann and King, this investigation reflected the work of the Special Prosecutions Unit in our office, the Denver Police Department's Human Trafficking Unit, the Colorado Department of Revenue Criminal Tax Enforcement Section, and the Lakewood Police Department. What we need the public to understand is human trafficking is a growing problem. We see it in all parts of Colorado. What happens is human trafficking related businesses that are operating illegally may represent themselves, in this case, as massage parlors, and thereby victimize those working there and further other criminal activity. Going after this is a high priority. The way we do it is law enforcement, community partners working together to investigate and uncover this victimization and trafficking of people for sexual servitude. The way we do it is getting the public to know about it, report crimes, and then having law enforcement work together. We are so fortunate to be able to work with DA Beth McCann. This is an expertise of DA McCann. She actually passed landmark legislation as a state legislator to strengthen our laws, and now as DA, she's helping to enforce those laws. Let me turn the mic over to DA Beth McCann.
And I want to thank you very much, Attorney General Weiser, for your leadership in this area, because this is truly a partnership, and we are not going to be able to stop this kind of behavior without a lot of community and law enforcement partners. So thank you. So about a year ago, a man walked into a massage parlor called the Jewel Spa at 6th and Sheridan. He thought it was a legitimate massage business. So he was surprised when, during the course of this encounter, he was asked or propositioned for a sexual act, which he declined. And then, after speaking to the woman, she began to cry and became emotionally distressed. Now, this man did the right thing, and he called the Denver Police Department and reported what had happened. He is to be commended for seeing something and saying something. The call is what began a nearly year-long investigation spearheaded by the incredible work of the Denver Police Department Human Trafficking Unit in conjunction with my Human Trafficking Unit in my office. And it involved to include the Lakewood Police Department, the Wheat Ridge Police Department, the 1st Judicial District, and the Colorado Attorney General's Office. Because the initial incident occurred at the Jewel Spa, the code name for this investigation became Bedazzled. Throughout the investigation, detectives developed information about several women suspected to be victims of human trafficking. The trafficked victims at Jewel Spa and others were all offered support services through the Denver Anti-Trafficking Alliance, which is headquartered in my office, and the Asian Pacific Development Center, with whom we have a relationship to work with victims of human trafficking. Last summer, Denver City Council passed an ordinance requiring massage businesses to be licensed here in Denver in an effort to prevent human trafficking. We patterned that after the Aurora ordinance. This case is an excellent example of why that measure was necessary. That new tool, which goes into effect July 1st, will greatly enhance our ability in Denver to go after traffickers who force their victims into these intolerable situations. As a law enforcement community, we are getting better and better about dismantling these complex human trafficking operations. By working together and coordinating our resources, law enforcement and our community partners are supporting the many needs of victims of human trafficking and holding the human traffickers accountable for the pain and suffering that they cause. I want to thank the grand jury as well for their efforts and work and service. And I look forward with our colleagues to prosecuting these cases in the Denver District Court. Thank you all so much for your cooperation. This is, as Attorney General Weiser mentioned, a priority for me. We started the Human Trafficking Unit when I came into office, and we have worked very closely with the Denver Police Department Human Trafficking Unit and are just very pleased that we were all able to work together to bring this indictment. Thank you. Oh, and now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague out in Jefferson County, the district attorney for the 1st Judicial District, Alexis King.
Thank you so much, DA McCann. Thank you, Attorney General Phil Weiser. I really want to echo what both of them have said. Human trafficking, I can tell you as a former human trafficking prosecutor out here in Jeffco, it is not held by boundaries, by county or by jurisdiction. And it really is always a cross-jurisdictional effort when we want to hold people accountable for taking advantage of some of the most vulnerable people in our communities. This was truly a collaborative effort, and I really want to thank not only Chief Payson's team, but also Chief McCaskey's team out in Lakewood. These cases take a lot of time to put together and a lot of care in working with people who have endured significant trauma. We are going to be contributing one of our senior deputy DAs to be supporting the prosecution down in Denver. And really, she's one of the really qualified human trafficking prosecutors in the state. And we're lucky to have her serve in our office and to be able to participate in this prosecution. Out here, we've been thinking a lot about jury service and what it takes for people to sit through difficult cases. And DA McCann made a great point of thanking those grand jurors, and I would like to extend those thanks as well. It takes a lot of service, and often the most valuable thing that we have to give as community members is time. And so an extra thanks to them. These cases are not easy to listen to, and we can't do it without a grand jury. So many thanks to them, and thanks to Sergeant Kafer for spearheading this. Law enforcement is essential in holding these folks accountable, and we depend on you to bring our cases to court. So many thanks to all of you, and look forward to the next steps.
So I just wanted to take a moment and first thank the individual who came forward and provided the tip. These are very complicated cases, and without the courage to see something and say something and take that next step to come forward, we'd have a vulnerable population that would still be suffering dehumanizing types of crime. So we're very thankful there. I could not be more thankful for the partnership and the collaboration. As DA McCann indicated, in the city of Denver, we have dedicated full-time resources to this issue that the Attorney General has indicated is growing in our state. And through this collaboration across jurisdictional boundaries is how we can help people that are being victimized, vulnerable populations that are being victimized. I'm very proud of the efforts of Sergeant Kafer and our human trafficking team. I'm very thankful for the work of the Lakewood and Wheat Ridge police departments in helping. I'm very thankful for the prosecutional team that is put together so we can hold these individuals accountable for victimizing our community. I just want to introduce Aaron, who will be available for questions. He and his team, they work tirelessly to make sure that these complex and difficult cases are fully investigated to try to give the strongest case possible so we can help keep our community safe. Sergeant Aaron Kafer.
Thank you, Chief. And I am Sergeant Aaron Kafer. I supervise our human trafficking unit in the Denver Police Department, and that's part of our Strategic Investigations Bureau. I would echo everyone's remarks here where we feel like we're in a good position with this case. The investigation was pretty grueling, and it was a long and complex investigation. We're fortunate to have, as the Chief said, dedicated resources here at the Denver Police Department. And these are some of our finest, most experienced investigators that work hard on these cases that, can even take an emotional toll on us in law enforcement. But I think what I want to highlight really is that, as the other folks have pointed out, this case did start with a community member coming forward and making this known to us. And while we already understand that the illicit massage industry exists, and while there's a lot of illicit massage businesses in Denver County and Jefferson County, we rely on the specific information given to us from the public. And in this case, that was instrumental to start us down the path of understanding what was happening at that specific location. Another thing that makes these type of investigations challenging is that, number one, these are businesses that are operating with the appearance of a legitimate business. So it's difficult unless somebody who visits a location, like in this instance, and tells us some information that's happening. So that began the investigation, got us off and running. We did have tremendous support from Lakewood Police Department, eventually Wheat Ridge Police Department as well, and the prosecution teams through the Attorney General's office and both district attorneys' offices. So we feel like we're in a good place. We are thankful for all of the help and support here.
Well, thank you, Sergeant, for putting all this work. I think you've gotten a sense of the levels of difficulty involved. We now open up the floor for any questions. Feel free to put them in the chat or raise your hand for the next 10 minutes or so. All right, Elise. Hopefully someone can elevate you to the stage here, or you can put it in the chat. There you are.
Hello.
Hi
Good morning,
there.
everybody. Thanks for taking the time for this press conference. My question is, the indictment lists 2 women as victims, but do we know approximately how many women were trafficked through these spas?
Sergeant, is there anything else you can add to that? I know we have some restrictions, but what if anything else can you add?
Yeah, I can just say that that is correct with what you're seeing in the indictment. And as it is still ongoing, I can't give a lot of specifics about the victims, but we do know that there were approximately 4 locations or 4 business locations here. And what we saw was that there was typically 2 to 3 ladies, females who were workers at almost in any given time. So as you might imagine, through the course of the investigation taking several months, we're not exactly certain on full numbers, but we know that there's at least 9 individuals that we had the opportunity to contact and offer services to on a day in March, in early March, when we executed search warrants at those locations. We did have the opportunity to contact 9 individuals at that time, and they were all offered victim services.
I want to acknowledge something and then turn the next question over to DA McCann. There was a time when human trafficking prosecutions were actually targeting the women who were being trafficked. We have changed both law and practice so that we're recognizing, and I think the sergeant said it very well, they are victims. And the story that DA McCann told is a powerful example of one of those victims breaking down. And that was obviously a pivotal moment. DA McCann, the question to you from Courtney of 9 News is, can you give some guidance on exactly how prevalent human trafficking is in our region?
Well, that is a difficult question to answer. I think it's more prevalent than we realize. And honestly, when we started the human trafficking unit here, and I think when the Denver police started their unit, we really didn't know. And we have to rely on the ability of people who use massage businesses and are involved to let us know when things are going on. One of the beauties of the ordinance that passed, as I mentioned, is that will allow the city to go in and do inspections. So city inspectors, fire department, zoning, things of that nature will allow inspectors to go in. The police department can't go into a business without probable cause, without a search warrant, without some reason to believe a crime is being committed. So we are hoping that through the observations, like I think you mentioned, Attorney General, about the room that appeared where people were living at the massage place. That is something that fire department inspectors can look for and can let us know if there appears to be suspicious circumstances. So we're hoping that we will be able to uncover more of these kinds of situations. But I also wanted to just briefly mention that you are correct, Attorney General Weiser, that we now take an approach that we are not prosecuting these mostly women, but sometimes men who are victims of human trafficking. We are really focusing on trying to get the traffickers. And that is what the police department is now really helping us focus on. One of the things, and it ties back to Elise's question, is that we can even sometimes proceed on these cases without the cooperation of the victims if we can show the financial trail. And that's another thing that makes these cases difficult, is we have trained now our investigators in terms of how to track the financial dealings, because that's really important in order to get the traffickers. And we are trying to avoid having to put the victims through more and more difficulties dealing with the court process and the system if we can prove a case without actually having to call them as witnesses. Sometimes we will have to do that, but these are challenging cases. They're interesting cases for lawyers and financial folks, but they are, they're not the same thing as just observing one incident. They are very complicated, and we are very, very fortunate in Colorado to have the kind of collaboration that we have. So that was a long answer to a short question.
Well, important answer. Mallory Anderson has a question as well. They want to bring you up. There you go.
Hi, I'm with KRDO in Colorado Springs. KRDO has covered similar illicit spa busts in this region. How big of an issue is this statewide? And what's the AG's office doing to address this problem that's taking place across Colorado?
Thank you. Let me answer the question, and then if DA King's willing to answer a related question, as we get the word out to the public, what are telltale signs to look for? So we're continuing to raise awareness and look for ways to raise awareness on the front end. It's been emphasized, but I don't think we can emphasize it enough. It's if you see something wrong, you can say something. And that's one thing where we're going to keep working on getting awareness. Also, we've talked about exactly what DA McCann said. The type of bill that was passed in Aurora and now in Denver around licensing of massage parlors is a very valuable tool that we're trying to encourage others to take advantage of, so these businesses don't necessarily elude scrutiny, which helps keep them operating illicitly. We also, as noted in this case, operate the statewide grand jury. And so this case is really exemplary of what we do, why we do it, and how we do it. We work to help connect dots between interjurisdictional crimes, and we bring expertise. DA McCann mentioned this around things like tax fraud, which can actually become a very useful charge in cases like this that we can also use to go after the wrongdoers. So this is a priority. We're going to continue to use our resources, and we need more than our office. We need the public to be aware of this. We're going to constantly look to ways to get people engaged. With that, District Attorney King, what are some signs that members of the public can look for to know maybe, hey, how do I report this? And what do people do when they see something?
So one of the things that is often noticeable is when there's kind of an unrelated or inexplicable older adult with someone that doesn't really make sense. Not a partner, not a friend, not a spouse. It doesn't really make sense for how this person is engaged with a victim, and that there seems to be an element of control over how they're operating in the community. Obviously, someone who does not have control over their own identification or their own finances. Sometimes there is evidence of, physical harm that they're carrying around with them in the community, and obviously anxiety, and really a concern with engaging with just anyone in the general population as they're moving through. Maybe they're at the grocery store, maybe they're across from you at the gas pump. But these are signs that we train on to let community members know on how to report. Obviously, massage parlors can pose a particular challenge because they can be very cloistered, and it may be very hard, particularly when folks don't have any control over money or identification, to even be seen out in the community. And so they are particularly challenging level of victimization and control that perpetrators inflict. And that's why bringing a case like this is so important to the community.
We have, I think, a final follow-up question from Elise. So go ahead, Elise, what's your follow-up?
I wanted to ask how these women were being lured over to Denver to work here? Kind of how did that work? How did they become victims in these cases?
Sergeant Caver, that's a valuable question in general, specifically here. Do we know what the backstory was, how they were lured and how they were trafficked?
So some of those details we are still working on. I think we can say in this case and generally from our experience is that there's never really one specific fact pattern related to that. We do know that many of the victims in this case came from other states and perhaps even other countries. We suspect that there's communications that we don't perhaps know about just yet that have created a situation where people fly into the state or into the city. I think it's an important piece to note that is part of the challenge with illicit massage businesses is that in this case we saw victims who were living inside of basically a business, a retail business building. And that's concerning, and a red flag, obviously, for investigators to see that people are not living in a hotel or a house or something that we would look at as more traditional, but rather makeshift kitchens and sleeping quarters set up inside a place of business. So from experience, that's indicative of some level of control happening in a massage business. I think it's also important to note that, we're speaking a lot about the illicit massage businesses. There are a lot of legit, non-illicit massage businesses in our city and throughout the state. We've had a lot of contact over the last couple of years with industry representatives who helped us in support of the ordinances that have taken place in Denver. So definitely want to make it clear that it's not that not all massage businesses are involved in illicit activity, but some of those indicators that we have seen are, from the street level, is a massage business that has all of the windows covered with posters or that are blacked out and you can't see inside is one indication. Other indications are, many individual treatment rooms or areas inside of a business that are suspicious, that might contain a living quarters or makeshift kitchens and things like that.
Well, I want to thank everyone for joining us, particularly our law enforcement professionals. And I want to underscore, here's how people can get help. There is a Colorado human trafficking hotline. It's available 24/7. And the goal is to connect those who might be exploited and those who might have tips with service providers and referral resources. You can reach out to this hotline at 866-455-5075, or you can even text 720-999-9724. I want to thank everybody for joining us and wish everyone a safe weekend. We'll continue this work. And again, we're fortunate to have such great partners and collaborators. Thanks, everybody.